Today, we become legends.
From a 3-second cooldown Siphon Darkness to an ult that resets your other ability cooldowns, this is why Old Nox was a better design than New Nox in Smite. There's currently a gem sale going on over at nexus.gg/intersect for the Smite birthday. Gem packs are up to 33% off, so if you've been waiting for a sale to buy some, now's your chance. That's nexus.gg/intersect with a 3. But back to the video. So Old Nox is a design that I feel super intrigued by, as she was not really your typical burst mage like she is now. She was much more focused on utility and counterplay, and I found it made for a much more interesting and fun design than haha 2+1 on repeat, which is basically current Nox. Despite being one of the weakest releases we've ever seen in terms of her actual performance. So to kick things off, Nox actually had two passives. They were both candle based with a very similar design to her current passive, but providing different stats. Her release passive was sort of a reverse Chak passive, where enemies and allies excluding Nox herself cast abilities near her, she gains a candle, at 4 her next ability is free. This passive, however, didn't last very long, and within 3 months it was changed to be 4% damage mitigation per candle, and to trigger on Nox's abilities, not other players' abilities, to give her more control over it. This was also where they introduced the candles blowing out when taking damage. But moving on from an admittedly pretty boring passive, we have Shadow Barrier. This ability was a really interesting way to do a shield, as it gave you up to 90% damage mitigation at release. That was changed to 80% flat after a few patches, and this buff lasted for 2 seconds, originally 1 second. The closest design to this that currently exists will be Nem Shield. They're the same duration and do roughly the same thing. Nem Shield heals her and negates all damage with a cap of 420, whereas Nox only negates 80% of damage but has no health cap, making Nox's shield better against certain abilities like a max range Vulcan ult for example, and Nem Shield better against abilities that do medium damage. Nox also gains knock-up, root and slow immunity on cast, which is a really underrated factor on the ability, whereas Nem Shield straight up gets broken for no value if she gets hard CC'd. Nox gets straight up immunity to some of the most prevalent CCs in the game like slows and knockups. This shield felt weird to use because of its specific niche in terms of countering basic attacks or single large hitting abilities, as well as knock-up, slow or root based gods. But overall, I did like the design of Shadow Barrier. It was a lot like getting the perfect Nem shield, since at release it only lasted 1 second, so you had to be very sparing with it. But this was buffed to last 2 seconds shortly before her rework in June 2014. So much like current Nox's 2 and 1 combo together and are basically 2 halves of one ability, well, that idea wasn't new to Nox when she was reworked. In fact, her 2 and 3 from her original design comboed in a similar way, but not exactly the same. The 2 abilities in question are Nightfall Raven and Siphon Darkness. The Raven was a line damage and silence that was ultimately pretty unimpressive at release and was buffed several times before the rework. The 3 was very similar to her current 2, except it did way less damage but had a 3-second base cooldown and was meant for spam poking and combining with her 2, which marks the enemy so that the next Siphon Darkness deals double damage. Despite being a very similar ability design all things considered, Siphon Darkness was used completely differently back then. It's also worth noting that it didn't silence like it does now, the silence was on Nightfall Raven instead. But moving on to my absolute favourite part of release Nox and why I want parts of her design to come back, Night Terror, the ultimate pre-rework, dealt damage and linked you to an enemy god. Whenever the enemy god casts an ability while under the effect, they take the initial damage again and all of Nox's ability cooldowns are reduced by 5 seconds. As with Osiris's link, it was breakable if you run far enough away from Nox, and after 5 seconds it expired normally. So this ability effectively acts as a pseudo silence, since literally no one wants to take an extra 500 damage and reset the Nox's cooldowns. However, it lasts 5 seconds, and so most people, at least back in the day, would try to use abilities into it, even if it's as simple as using your dash to break the link. You'll still proc her ult once doing that, which is 380 plus 150% of power in total, plus 5 seconds off of all the Nox's abilities. However, overall, Nox was not a strong release. In fact, she's probably bottom 5 weakest releases of all time, and she received some severe buffs after launch to get her into a playable state. Literally over a dozen damage duration and cooldown buffs to make her kit overall feel stronger. However, the biggest change came to her ult in December of 2014. Nox was no longer required to maintain the link to enemies, projectile range and speed both got increased on the initial hit, and enemies take the damage again and are stunned for 1 second when the ability expires, regardless of if they cast an ability or not. This allowed the ult to get plenty of guaranteed value given the initial hit, the final hit for the stun, and if they're not casting abilities you can effectively treat this as a 5-second silence, and if they are casting abilities you get a shitload more damage and cooldown resets. These massive buffs did actually bring Nox into viability, and she in fact took a few nerfs before being reworked into present day Nox in June 2015. While this design didn't last long, not even a year in the game, I think some aspects of it can definitely be taken and adapted to modern Smite in some way. The ultimate and shield especially I think are really awesome designs. You could even just put a lesser version of the ult effect onto her current ult, just make it deal like 3% max health or something on 1 second cooldown refund when they cast an ability instead of 5 seconds. Given present day Nox's combo is on a 10 second cooldown, getting just 2 procs of the old ult would reset her combo, and I don't think anyone's asking for that. To be honest, the title is a bit of hyperbole to kind of keep the series going. It's difficult to say whether Old Nox or New Nox are better designs, but I do lean towards Old Nox. The 2 was trash and boring, but other than that, I liked her old kit a lot. It felt far more skill testing and niche than just a generic burst mage with a combo that she is now. Though from her present design, I also like the ult and 3, just hate the 1 and 2, plus the passive is boring as hell and should just be reworked in my opinion. But that's not really a point for Old Nox either, because her passive also sucked and was boring. A cool idea I had that is almost certainly way too strong is to rework the passive to incorporate her old shield. She still lights 4 candles as she always has, but at 4 candles, her next ability also puts a 1 second high mitigation shield on her. The passive was already trash in her old design, and since she lost the ability to spam Siphon Darkness on a 3 second cooldown, it's only gotten worse and less synergistic. I feel like this kind of effect could be a really nice addition to her kit. Of course, it doesn't have to have the same stats as before, it can be less than 80% mitigations if it will be too strong. But the idea is what I'm trying to get across here. But that's all I got for why Old Nox is a better design than New Nox. Leave your thoughts down below, or alternatively your hate comments if you're a Nox main. I've yet to see one that doesn't have a seizure when you suggest Nox might be a bad design, but yeah, catch you guys in another one later on. Have a great day, and peace out, you nerds.